I'm willing to bet that you use a music streaming service. It's probably Spotify, but it could be Amazon Music or Apple Music. It's probably not Tidal, which is what I use, but it could be. But you might not know exactly what goes on behind the scenes to actually bring you that music. Sure, Spotify's paltry payments to artists is probably looming in the back of your head, but that's just one small part of the industry's wider problems as of late. It's not just Spotify. An alternative like Bandcamp has been really struggling lately, and prices are going up across the board. What's going on? So I took a trip down to downtown Toronto. There's the Spotify office right there. They got an outpost here. Nothing fancy, but it works. A second quarter report in 2022 found that Spotify makes over 30% of the market share for audio streaming platforms. They ran into a lot of problems, though, because even though they made up a lot of the music streaming, they were financially squeezed, and it was mainly because of their podcast commitment. You might remember the deal that Spotify made with podcast heavyweight Joe Rogan. Their biggest investment into podcasting came in May 2020 when Spotify signed an exclusive deal with the Joe Rogan Experience. Now, at the time, the deal was reported to be more than $100 million. But recent reporting by the New York Times revealed that that deal was actually more than $200 million. Here's the thing, though. Their huge podcasting gamble hasn't paid off. To help get to the bottom of this, I spoke to Paris Marks, who's a tech reporter and host of the podcast Tech Won't Save Us, about the state of the audio streaming industry right now.
So basically, Spotify and companies like Apple and other major companies thought that there was this big kind of commercial opportunity, kind of untapped opportunity in podcasting in particular. And so they poured a ton of money into that space to acquire independent podcasting companies to try to kind of further commercialize podcasting in a way that hadn't been done previously. The core of a podcast is the RSS feed, right? And the RSS feed is kind of open and available for everybody. These companies, Spotify in particular, thought that, okay, maybe we can move into this space and we can make more podcasts that are like exclusive to our platform and make it this kind of platformized thing in a way that podcasting isn't, but other media are.
In a report by City AM, they lay out some of the specific issues with Spotify's podcast plan. Some investors in Spotify have even blamed the podcast expansion for, quote, the explosion in the firm's costs. Enders Analysis, a media research firm, classified Spotify's podcast expansion as having spectacularly failed to deliver the anticipated financial rewards to shareholders. Between the plan's announcement in 2018 and 2022, the company had sunk more than $1 billion into the podcasting business. But Spotify posted a net loss of £367 million for 2022, and another £260.2 million loss in the second quarter of 2023.
All right, I gotta go back. I don't have the gloves for this. It's Toronto in November. I don't know what I was thinking.
Now, Spotify is also at the same time restructuring their payment plan to reach a certain threshold before they start paying out any money to artists. Now, it's not really because of their podcast problem. Spotify has been struggling with a white noise problem on the app as well, but reports of this raised fears in smaller artists who worried they wouldn't be able to access funds as much. Most notably, only tracks that have reached 1,000 plays in the past 12 months are eligible for payout. As Spotify put it in a blog post, Spotify will not make additional money under this model. There's no change to the size of the music royalty pool being paid out to rights holders from Spotify. We will simply use the tens of millions of dollars annually to increase the payments to all eligible tracks, rather than spreading it out into $0.03 payments. Now, Paris thinks that while Spotify certainly underpays its artists, this new restructuring doesn't have as much as an effect as some people have feared.
You know, it's been a little while since I've looked really deeply into streaming, but my view is that 1,000 is not particularly difficult, and that even an independent artist is going to get over that threshold, quite quickly.
To be fair, I don't want your takeaway to be that every music streaming service is going to collapse tomorrow. It's not like Apple Music, YouTube Music, or even Spotify is going to fold by the end of the year. There have been some positive moves too. But while prices are increasing across the board, there's additional trouble brewing behind the scenes. So before we leave Spotify behind, a few important updates were announced while I was editing this video. First, Spotify is laying off 17% of its workforce. That's expected to be around 1,500 people. This is the third major round of layoffs for the company this year, with a sizable chunk coming from their podcast divisions previously. Then, shortly after that, Spotify announced their CFO Paul Vogel would be leaving in March of 2024. Pod News then reported that Vogel sold more than $9.3 million in Spotify shares the day the layoffs were announced. It's unclear if these two things were related. Also, my streaming darling, Tidal, announced that they were going to be laying off 10% of their workforce. Now, Tidal is a much smaller company, so that translates to 40 jobs, but it seems that may have been more prescient than I intended when I started this video. Usually when people bring up Spotify alternatives, They talk about Bandcamp. If you don't know, Bandcamp is a service that allows artists to directly sell their music to the fans. Bandcamp, of course, takes a cut of the sales. They are a business, but it allowed for a direct sales structure from artists to fans. Now, in March of 2022, Epic Games, yeah, that one, bought Bandcamp. Then, in March of 2023, this year, Bandcamp employees unionized. Epic Games then sold to Songtradr in October, who laid off 50% of the staff, including everyone on the union bargaining team. That leaves a question. If Bandcamp, the usual alternative for places like Spotify, is being hacked away at, what alternatives are there? There's two services I found in my research that purport to be more artist-focused. The first we'll talk about is Audius. Audius touts itself as artist-owned and controlled. So what does this mean? Is it a cooperative? Not exactly. In their white paper, they lay it out like this in the section marked Token Model. The Audius protocol is powered by the Audius Platform Token, and with the community support will likely leverage third-party stablecoins, as well as artist-specific tokens to unlock additional functionality in future. Essentially, people with crypto tokens get a say in how the service is run, and this is pretty much the structure of a DAO.
Does the name Audius ring a bell or anything?
No, unfortunately not.
No worries. So Audius is purports to be a music artist-owned platform with voting rights, but the way that they issue those voting rights are through crypto tokens. So
I could feel that coming. As soon as you said voting rights, I was like, oh, this is a DAO.
As you can probably tell from that clip, there's a lot of hesitancy around this idea of a crypto-centered democracy. Truth be told, crypto just doesn't have the same promise it did at the beginning of the 2020s.
I feel like there's not a whole lot of people still promoting crypto stuff right now. A lot of the real boosters, kind of took it out of their profiles and pretended they never did it. Some of them are facing lawsuits because of especially the celebrities and stuff for promoting crypto and doing so unethically and in violation of kind of various laws. And so if we're thinking about kind of what the future of music streaming is going to look like, or artists selling their music online, I think that we do need to be thinking about that and what that actually looks like and how it's done in a way that isn't just for the benefit of large platforms and large music labels, but for artists in particular. But I don't think putting it through some crypto platform is going to be the way that happens, because I think that, as I've been saying, I think it's been proven that the promises around those things have proven to be, not true, basically.
This may have actually been telegraphed in a 2020 interview with founders Roniel Rumberg and Forrest Browning. In the article on Days, the interviewer asks the founders about this thing that's going around Twitter where people are using loopholes to sell their tokens for cash. Rumberg's response is telling. Yeah, so unfortunately, legally, we can't comment on those areas. The other alternative I found is something called Resonate, which actually operates as a cooperative. The site says, no subscription, no ads, no corporation selling your data, no bots telling you what to like. So how does it work? Each time you stream a song, you pay a little bit of money, like a fraction of a cent at first, but the more you listen, the more you pay. Once you hit $1.40, you own the song forever. You can play it as many times as you like. That's pretty wild and a huge departure from a platform like Audius. You can even become a member with voting rights without getting into cryptocurrency. So it seems like there are alternatives out there that don't have to deal with huge companies like Spotify, Apple, or Amazon. But to be perfectly blunt, their viability just doesn't have the same financial backing that these companies got in the beginning or that they have now. So where does that leave us? Spotify isn't going away anytime soon, and prices aren't looking like they're going to drop either. But when I spoke to Paris, they said that this crunch of the consumer was always part of the plan.
Essentially, we were all sold a false bill of goods because of low interest rates, saying that we could have all of these services for super cheap. These companies basically lied to us to get us to move over to them and ensure that kind of physical media was eradicated, and these other ways of, kind of consuming media or doing all these other services that these tech companies offered were basically destroyed. And, we were reliant on the services that they offered so that then they could eventually have their monopolies or oligopolies jack up the prices once the time came. And this was always kind of the foundation of the model. I think it just took a little bit longer than they all expected.
While this isn't meant to be an autopsy of the music streaming industry, a lot is going on behind the scenes that you might not think. Does that mean that services like Audius or Resonate can fill the void? It depends, but one thing's for sure. The audio streaming industry is in a tough spot right now. And we're right there with them.